Hi there, I'm Rush Lilavivat. I'm the director of tabletop panels at DragonCon. Um, and with me today is Dallan Elk.
Hi, I'm one of the dungeon masters for the Adventures League at DragonCon, and I also run a D&D club at my school.
Yes, and Dallan was the youngest dungeon master at DragonCon about 2 years ago when it was running. So that's very, very cool. Um, so today we're going to be talking about training new GMs. And that's particularly cogent for Dallan because why? Why would that be particularly of interest for you?
So my school is fairly new. It's like 4 or 5 years old at this point. So the D&D club in itself is also very new. It's something that I personally started. And because of that, I need to make sure that when I leave next year, when I graduate from being a senior, I want to make sure that it has the ability to self-sustain. It has the ability to create new dungeon masters. And because of that, I need to teach new dungeon masters to DM when I leave. And so that can kind of start a cycle.
That's amazing that you had that vision that you wanted to continue after you're gone.
Yeah,
Um,
that I think is the most important part to me currently, beyond obviously having the players and having a good time, making sure that when I leave, things can continue because I really wanted to make my mark on, the school.
that is so cool. I love that. All right. I really do. So before we get into training new GMs, I want to hear the whole story because that's a very sizable club. You said 25 to 35 people.
Yeah, about 30 players. So 30 people in total. So okay, so we have like 20 players, right?
Okay.
And then I have 5 people who last year didn't join the club because of COVID reasons. And then I have 5 GMs. So like about 30 people total in the club. Um,
So I can only imagine what it might be without COVID.
and the problem is those numbers were 18 of those 20 were sophomores, right? So that this year they will be juniors. So if you can imagine, we have two complete grade levels who haven't been touched like at all. And so I'm kind of a little bit nervous, and that's the other side of that. Beyond just the sustainability, is I don't want to have to turn people away because I can't DM a 25-person table.
Right.
Um, and so I don't want to have to turn people away. I want to be able to have the GMs to be able to accept as many people as we can.
So, okay, how did this get started? Like you said one day I want to have a D&D club. Yes?
So when I was a freshman,
Okay.
me and another student got together and created a D&D club, and we couldn't really find a teacher who was into that sort of thing. And so but we did need a teacher, so we kind of just got a teacher to volunteer her time to kind of babysit us, if you will, while we ran the club. It honestly ended up being kind of a shit show. It was really rough. We didn't have the same people every time. Um, at some point, she who was helping me run it basically decided that she didn't want to just play D&D. She wanted to play Pathfinder and all these other things. And essentially, she just got with her little group of friends, all of whom happened to be experienced and could dungeon master, right? So she and her like six little group of friends went and played like Pathfinder or Call of Cthulhu or some other role playing game that wasn't D&D, which I'm fine with. But when you're starting a new club, you have to start small and expand, right? And all of those people that could have DM'd instead were just playing. And so I was left to DM a 12-person table, which notably was very rough. Running a different one shot because one time I'd have 6 people, the next time I'd have 14 people, and it was just ridiculous. And I couldn't plan ahead of time, so everything was punitively arbitrary, as you say.
Right.
It was just
Wow.
really rough.
Okay.
And so that kind of imploded at the beginning of the summer. And we hadn't really touched it because of COVID. We decided no D&D club this year until my world history teacher came to me and said, "I hear that you are the person that I should contact if I want to start a D&D club." And I said, "Let's go. Let's do this." And she said, "One of the things I want," it was so funny because she said this. She said, "I want to make sure that this people know that this is a commitment, that if you're going to be here, you're going to be here every time." Which I was like, this is perfect. This is everything I could. This is honestly the universe saying, "Dallan, you need to start a D&D club right here. This is going to be your legacy at Paul Duke." And from there, we just kind of went. I got a bunch of my friends. I persuaded a bunch of people to join. I came up with this grandiose idea of doing a, because we ended up having like three main tables. So I came up with the grand idea of having at the end of the year one big boss fight, and I kind of orchestrated that between all three of the tables. And yeah, it just kind of evolved from there. And now it's like, okay, now we actually have to start legit. You know, we're not starting in the middle of the year this time. We're doing this legit. We are this is a healthy club. This is really fun, really awesome. And I have a lot of ideas that I want to do, and I just want to make sure it doesn't die, you know?
No, okay. Wow. That is really amazing. So what I'm hearing from you is it was a bunch of people getting together. They weren't sure what they were doing, which is fine. That's all
Yeah.
the beginning of D&D. Everybody's been through that experience. But the problem was that people weren't showing up consistently, so it's hard to get an adventure going, and then you might have a small group or a big group. Wow, that would be very difficult. But then you had a teacher come in and tell everybody, okay, this is a commitment. You have to show up for every meeting, that sort of thing. Is that good so far?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, so once she said that, people took it seriously and they made it a commitment. Is that correct?
Yeah, most people did. The other that group of people who got together and just played Call of Cthulhu, they never came back.
Okay.
This they didn't come back, but yeah, a lot of people who joined came pretty permanently, and I was, you know, obviously you're gonna have the occasional I'm sick or I'm not gonna be here, or you know, but when they were there and were they able to be there, obviously if they were failing classes they couldn't be there and yada yada yada, but if they could, they had the option of being there, they were there. And I was able to run a great encounter for and a great, you know, 3 month long adventure.
Wow. That is really cool. Would you say that people took the direction and showed up and made that commitment? Like, because sometimes you say, well, this is a commitment, and then they still don't take it seriously. Why do you think people did take this seriously and did show up consistently?
So I think because it was said during COVID, people weren't doing anything else.
Gotcha.
um
Gotcha.
And because we kind of had that fresh start, we were able to say, okay, this is the club we want to make. These are our ideals. And now that people have been in the club, they've seen what it's like. They're like, okay, they understand that this is a commitment. And the people that are there are going to continue being a commitment. Now we have this kind of branding. This is a commitment. This is a club that I actually have to think about and show up for. Um, I think, I hope at least that that will kind of manifest itself into future years. Yeah.
I gotcha. That's really really cool. Now, most people when they show up, I'm very curious about this. Are they wanting to play? Are they wanting to GM? Both? What is the
It depends
what is
on
the
the
feeling?
player. It
Okay, gotcha.
really depends on the player. A lot of I have had players come talk to me after like 3 sessions of playing, asking me to teach them how to GM, and I'd be like, whoa, 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 you don't even know how to action search yet.
Okay, right.
Um, let's take it a step back. Let's have you play for a little bit, and then yeah, I'll teach you how to GM when you're ready. But then I've also had those people who are like, I really don't want to GM at all. This is, you know, I'm just a player, and you know that's fine. Um, but I really do want to encourage people because my idea is right. I want to, because D&D is such a, it's such a cultural thing. You know, our parents did it, and then it kind of died for a while, and now our generation's kind of bringing it back. And because of that, we're going to have a lot of new players. You know, a lot of people won't have played that much D&D before. Um, and so we really wanted to make the club able to teach people how to play. So the idea is you come in freshman year, you learn how to play. You play freshman year, you play sophomore year. Junior year, you either play or you DM, depending on what you want and what the club needs. And then senior year, you dungeon master. That is the hopeful plan. That's the like kind of idea that we'd like to do. Obviously, we can't guarantee that people will join for all 4 years, but that is the path that we would like people to go on, because now you've come out of it 4 years playing D&D. You're I mean, you've got a lot of experience in your belt. You've got either 2 or 3 characters, or 1 or 2 years of DMing, making your own story, understanding how that works. Now you can go into college having, all of the amazing confidence and friendship benefits that D&D provides, on top of the storytelling experience of being a DM.
That's very cool. And what did did your teacher like that plan? I don't know who came up with that plan, but what did
I came up with that plan.
Okay.
Um, we really haven't talked about it too much,
Okay.
because it's been the summer, and the teacher's been running summer school,
Mhm.
so she's had a lot on her plate.
Mhm.
So first week in August, we're gonna sit down, we're gonna have a meeting, we're gonna talk about all the ideas and all of the kind of things that we want to do with the club. Yeah.
Very, very cool. Amazing. So okay, so before we get to training a new GM, what has your experience been training new GMs? How
So
many, well, first of all, wait, right before we get to that, how many people have wanted to be a new GM that you,
have wanted to be a new
yes.
GM. I have been asked by probably 8 or 9 people,
Okay.
in total, and that is over my entire high school career.
Oh, okay, okay.
Um, and that ranges anything from I've just started playing and I want to learn everything about this new world and it's super exciting,
Mhm.
from I kind of think I know what you're doing, but will you play with me and just kind of give me some feedback and make sure? Um, yeah, 8 or 9 is kind of
Okay.
ranging all the way from there.
All right, and then so now what has your experience been training new GMs? What's that been like?
It's been really interesting because it's been like I'm kind of this player role because I'm playing a character and I'm intentionally either making things hard or making things easy on them, depending on how much I think they can take. Um, but then also at the same time, kind of making sure I am kind of keeping track of what the DM's doing, behind the curtain. So I kind of afterward will go in and make sure what their thought process was, in this moment or this moment, and kind of clarify how you can either run the story smoother or how you can probably make this more engaging, or, you know, oftentimes people have the basic idea. Oftentimes people have the basic idea. I am going to run a story. People are going to do an adventure, kill the thing, get some treasure. That's basic. Basically most people understand when they come to me. They understand, like, this is the basic format. They I don't usually have to start from the ground up. But my experience has been a lot of times there are 3 main places where people struggle. The
Oh, okay.
first is the first is the plot hook. It's getting your characters to get into the story. You know what I mean? It's very easy to say, okay, I'm here. Here's your clue to go from point A to point B, right? I have a letter from somebody in this other town. Well, obviously, you're going to go to the other town, right? That's very easy to do. But starting off, it's a very difficult, and I struggle with this personally, getting people actually into the adventure and having the ball start moving. I think people really struggle with that. And so that's one. Number two is they struggle with momentum. There is a lot of moments where they really want it to be quick. They want it to be, which is the intent. They want it to be, okay, this isn't really that important, let's go. But the players don't really feel that they are like, I'll give you an example. So I am currently training a new GM, and uh they are running this campaign where essentially we're all the monsters and the humans are invading the monsters land, which was
That's
really
awesome.
creative and really interesting.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
So we all had to play monstrous races. I am playing a Leonin like assassin, and this human kid kind of was a spy and got into this, and kind of broke in and tried to steal some stuff for our PCs, which was a great plot hook. It was really exciting. But when we captured the NPC, we didn't really understand what to do with it. It was kind of just, the intent was capture him, leave him, and move on, or capture him and bring him with you. We spent 3+ hours interrogating the kid to no avail. And it was things like that that people really struggle with when they're GMing. Is kind of
Okay, so that's momentum.
translating to the players what they're supposed to do.
Gotcha. So that's momentum. And
And
then
then
that was the
the
third.
third part is combat. Um, a lot of times it's very easy to make players feel like they are doing nothing. You know what I mean? It's very easy to
Yeah.
um and there's a lot of kind of aspects to this. The biggest one I find is not really understanding the power level of players versus the power level of your monsters, because on paper things look balanced, but in reality they're not. And so you will either mid balance midway through the fight, or do something, and a lot of times it looks really cheesy.
No,
um
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but a lot of times that's still okay. The problem comes when the players feel like they aren't having an impact, you know. When I would hit the manticore, I would do 4 points of damage, and because that's I rolled a 1 on the damage dice, right? So I deal 4 points of damage, and it doesn't really feel like I'm doing anything. It doesn't even seem like the DM's marking it down, because
Mm.
it doesn't even seem like the DM's marking it down at all. So those are the three main things that I see players struggle with when they're learning how to DM.
That is totally fascinating. That and so you've been kind of training them by like being a player and then going back with them and like reflecting with them, that sort of thing. Yeah, I can totally see that. The hook is pretty okay. Wait. So do you guys do session zeros or do people just jump right in? Because I know it's sort of an after school club, so your time is limited. So
It depends. Generally, we like to meet. So personally, I meet with my players because I want to discuss their character.
mhm,
But I generally don't do a group session zero.
mhm.
I do kind of mini session zeros with each person, kind of going over why are you here, what are you doing, what's your motivation. Um, yeah, that's generally what I encourage people to do.
Okay, so let me talk about session zeros a little bit. So I've been doing some reading and research and things like that, and one of the interesting things about session zeros is that they're very important, but a lot of times they take up a lot of time. And when you're out playing D&D as a group or whatever, a lot of times that first session is a session zero, and you actually don't play. You just make characters, make their motivations or whatever, and you
Mm-hmm.
figure out all the these things and make your character complete. And someone brought up a good point in that can be kind of boring because you've expected to play.
Mm-hmm.
So they suggested running a short session, like a 1 or 2 encounter session, um, right after you make characters, and I have found that to be really, really good too. Um, Especially just very quickly, one really good example, and I'll make it a longer story if it becomes cogent later. But we were about to play a Star Wars game, and we made our characters, and we played like a 2 encounter session, and I began to realize very rapidly that the character I had in mind was not going to work. In fact, the party needed a leader, and I didn't make a leader because the other 2 people that were playing at the table didn't know anything about Star Wars. So I was like, "Oh my god, we're gonna be lost." Okay, no, 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 no. We have to back up. I have to. So the next session, I was like, "Guys, my character's totally different. He's much older, so I could play somebody who knew about the Star Wars universe to kind of guide them through and educate them."
Mm-hmm.
Players themselves didn't know about Star Wars. So that's how a session zero like that can be very valuable. Like if you play 1 or 2 encounters, you can tell right away, oh, this is not going to work. You know, this guy is going to try to kill this guy right away, or this character concept doesn't work very well. So one thing that I've done that's been very valuable is shorten the character creation so you can have a little bit of playtime. And for
I like
players
that.
of your age and lower, I think that would be a great idea because then they're not sitting there. Well, I did you play anything? No, I just made a character. That
Yeah.
I can understand how that's not that fun. So, um, and ways you can expedite it are, you have in the D&D book a lot of pre-generated stats. That you have that stat array where it's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
we're not going to add or subtract points. Just put the 17, 16, 15,
Yeah,
and
the
where you
standard
want.
array.
And then also another thing I found valuable is, okay, once you get that, figure out your bonuses, here are your class abilities. We're not going to do your proficiencies yet. We'll do your
Mm.
proficiencies in the next session, right? Because I'm introducing the concept of the game to them. And even though, and they can jump right in quicker because, again, this generation of kids has played video games,
Yeah,
things like that. So,
they're used to making their character and going right in.
yeah. So, whereas when I was growing up, it was bad because it was like, all right, you're playing a character that's not you. Okay, they're not me. No, 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 they're not you. And they have these things called stats, and they represent different. Now, so what? So I'm not that strong. No, you're not, because that's a 9. That's low.
Even though I go to the gym every Wednesday.
It was very bad. So now people can jump in a lot sooner. So my suggestion is for that first session, really quickly make characters, jump into, and part of your session 0 should be that first encounter. Now here's what you can do to help it from going off the rails, 1, and then 2, helping people with the hook. Put that into that first session 0. Like, okay, when you make characters, you all have to be members of the king's army, because the king is
Yeah.
going to send you on a mission. All right, you're all members of a thieves guild, and you're going to go on a heist. And if someone makes something that is not that, you have recourse. You can stop the game and be like, whoa, whoa, whoa! You were supposed to be a thief going on a heist. You've made an armored paladin. He's not going to want to steal anything. He can't sneak around. You know,
Yeah.
you, or, and actually, you can address that even before he makes the armored paladin. Well, I'm going to make a paladin. No, 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 no.
So
I'm going to
one
hide.
of the one of the things we really want to do with this is we kind of, at least one of my ideas, um, was we wanted to do kind of a group character creation session,
Right?
because we use D&D Beyond, right? And then from there, once we realize, okay, you're playing a paladin, you're playing a wizard, then we sort people into parties. So
Yeah,
that way we don't have 4 rogues, we don't have 12 wizards in a party. You know what I mean? Um,
that's perfectly valid. Or you can do it where we want all wizards, because we're going to have
that's
a wizard
true.
or whatever.
That's true.
But um, either way, I think that's totally fine.
Okay.
You could use it to make balanced parties, or group together characters or people that will be interesting, because it'll be up to the GM.
Yeah. In reality.
But build that hook into your session 0. So that takes care of problem 1 is your hook. Problem 2 of the momentum. Um, that is very hard, because many GMs who are very, very experienced have problems with momentum.
I have problems with momentum. I can
No,
tell you that.
everybody. That's a very, very difficult one.
Whenever my go-to is just whenever I notice a thing that is slow and people are kind of things jump out of the woods,
Yeah,
try and
that's
kill
exactly
you.
right. That's
Um,
I agree 100%. That's exactly right. So if something slows down, something should blow up, or something jumps out of the woods, or something provokes the action, right? And I do something very, very similar, because in my campaign worlds, the world is continuing to run in the background. So if you take a long time thinking about something, then something in the background is going to come to the forefront. So it's really the same thing that you said. Uh, I guess if I was training a new GM, I would say that's okay to do that. It's okay to have something jump out of the woods, or an NPC show up from a burning village saying, our village burned down, everybody's dying, please help. It doesn't have to be a monster. It can just be a person. Or you get a message that this thing is happening and it's really bad. Or it could even be your character remembers something. Um, if you don't head over there soon, your master that you care a lot about is going to be in danger. So you can say your character remembers this, and by the way, this is important to your character. So there's a lot of ways to do that to keep the action moving. I would just make that explicit to your GMs. And good ways to know when things have slowed down, because sometimes slowing down is good. Like let's say there's a healthy debate amongst the characters.
oh yeah, that's a very different story.
Right.
but it's more along the lines of, okay, everybody's been silent for like 20 seconds. Nobody really wants to speak up. Okay, let's do something.
Okay, right. So I would point out to your GMs what to look for, like long, long silences where they're they're long, long silences when players look lost, like, well, I don't know what to do. There's so many choices. I literally don't know what to do. Then what they're looking for is direction. If the players are sitting back and they're looking at their phone or they're leaned back and they're looking at the window, then that's disinterest. I'm getting kind of bored. That's when something should jump out of the woods. If they're lost, I usually present like multiple choice. I can either
Mm,
just break it down like, well, here's the deal. You can either go to the village, you can go to the woods outside the village and look inside and see what's going on, or you can ask somebody who's traveled to the village recently. So those are kind of like which would you like to do? And I always try to make the
yeah.
choice meaningful. I don't want there to be an illusion of choice. I want their choices to be meaningful. So in the campaign that we've played, Dallan, you'll remember you guys were trapped in the deep subconscious of humanity, and there was you had to go to a weird funhouse festival carnival type place, and there was the happy version and the dark version. So that's a meaningful choice. Where you go will change the course of the adventure. So when you present choices, those are the best choices. The where it's like, okay, when you make this choice, it's going to change how the adventure unfolds. Um, so that's if you're lost. If people are kind of disinterested, something jumps out of the woods, and then um, don't be afraid to start pulling the players along, and
Yeah.
that's the simple answer. But the complex answer is it takes years to hone that craft.
Yeah.
Pacing.
Absolutely.
And the final thing you said was
Combat. It was the balancing, the idea that swarms are deadly, um, and making the players feel like their decisions are meaningless.
okay. So what I'm hearing, perhaps, so I need to ask questions for you so you can clarify. Are maybe the GMs kind of making up the monster stats and hit points as they go, or are they pulling open the monster manual and bringing out something way too powerful because it looks cool, or something like that? What's going on there?
Either or. I mean, choose your, yeah. I mean, depends on the DM, but a lot of times it is more along the lines of kind of a railroad, right? It's giving plot armor to the characters or giving plot armor to the monsters, or fudging rolls when really like there are, everybody has their own opinion about fudging rolls. Personally, if it's not a meaningful fight, my monsters won't crit you if you're on low health. Like, my monsters will kill you, they will down you, but if it's a wolf on the side of the road and you just happen to come out at, 2 hit points, it's not going to crit you. Especially if it's like because of pack tactics or some crap. Uh, but regardless, like fudging rolls when they shouldn't be fudged, or introducing, okay, well, my characters are all level 6, so I'll just throw 20 goblins at them. Whoa, 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 we're all level 6, we can't target 20 goblins, this is going to take forever. Just all of those kinds of ideas around what looks good on paper but doesn't necessarily look so good in the
That is
game.
a wonderful question, and that could be its own episode by itself. And in fact, I think it should,
I
because
agree.
you've really tapped into something there. There's a lot to go into there. Okay, I'm going to try to make it not long and complicated. First of all, yeah, I can totally understand the plot armor thing, because a lot of starting and young GMs do this in that they have this cool story in mind. They want this big monster cut to come out, and they have this idea in their head. And if you zap it with, say, a feeble mind spell, well, that doesn't fit the story in my head. So it magically makes this saving throw. If you cast Charm Monster on it, and all of a sudden this monster's supposed to be fighting for me. Well, I don't like the way that sounds, so magically it makes its saving throw. Um, One thing you can do to start GMs out is let's have everyone roll on the table out in the open, and then talk to all your beginning GMs and say, hey, that means you're going to have big bad guys that fail their saving throw that first round, and it's okay. It is totally okay, because sometimes it's going to swing the other way, and that'll happen to the players. Um, the most interesting encounters I've had in D&D are when um, the players, where something was like, oh, this will be easy fight, and then all of a sudden it turned into a really like a death struggle because of a couple bad rolls.
Oh yeah.
So that is something you can start out with, like, hey, let's everyone roll out in the open. My son does that, and one of his great strengths as a game master is that he's okay with his bad guys losing. And he can even find amusement if they fumble really bad. He'll crack up and I'm like, all right, well, he fumbled this, so he trips over this rock and he falls face first, and his big sword clatters out of his hand, and he's like shocked that he doesn't have his big, huge, nasty looking weapon, and so it becomes funny, and he can roll with that and become like, okay, it's okay.
Yeah.
Um, so that would be one. Secondly, okay, in D&D, generally speaking, as a game master, when you're playing and you've set up things to fight the PCs, it's like a stereo system. You can kind of turn it up, the volume up, or you can kind of turn the volume down. Like if you notice that the players are taking way too much damage and they're getting a little bit nervous, then the monsters can do suddenly a little bit less damage, or
Mm.
they could suddenly miss some more. If the players are like mopping the floor with everything, then you're like, okay, I need to turn the volume up. So now the monsters are doing a little bit more damage, or things like that. I tend to do that. If I turn the volume up, I typically do it in the next encounter. I don't like altering or giving monsters stats or abilities they didn't have before, because it feels like cheating a little bit. I just go, you know what? I learned a lesson. They mop the floor with those guys. Cool. And it's okay. Sometimes if you watch, say, a sporting event, sometimes one team whomps the other.
Yeah.
Um, that's okay. But I learned my lesson. I go, aha, next time I know what to do, and it's the encounter might be harder. And then
Yeah.
I just continually turn up the volume until it's at the right level. Like, okay, that was still too easy.
And
Next,
I think I
there
think
we go. Mhm.
I think the other part of that, I 100% agree. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you
No, no,
there.
no, no, good. It's good.
Um, I think the other part of that is you as a GM or us as a GM, you have to really make sure that are your monsters really easily winning or really easily losing because of those are their stats, or are the players just all making bad rolls, or are the monsters just all making really good rolls, or vice versa, right? um and if that's the case, that's okay. That's part of D&D. That's part of the luck of it, right? Is that your characters are gonna screw up, the monsters are going to be awesome, and vice versa, right? um and that just has to be okay when your monsters fail the saving throw. uh and I think that's kind of going off what you said, is make sure that if you're going to alter your monster stats in between encounters, make sure that if you're going to raise the monster stats, make sure that your monsters lost not because your rogue got a critical hit on your big bad. Make sure it's not because this one character did something really awesome and got a really, really high roll on the damage dice. Make sure that even if those rolls were average, it would still have the exact same effect.
I agree very much. Um, okay, so we talked about the volume turning up, turning down. There was one other thing I think I was going to cover, but I lost. I lost it. It's okay. It's all good.
It's okay.
Um, I would say that is very hard to do, generally speaking, but that's one of the crafts. Oh, I remember what I was going to say. Especially for a lot of beginning GMs, A lot of big beginning GMs like to bring out some big bad monster that fights the whole party because that's what you see in the movies and the comics, books, etc. There's some big bad that challenges the whole party. It doesn't really work that way in real life. If you have one guy versus five guys, it's not going to work out so well for the one person. Um, so if you have some kind of big monster or big threat, it should have helpers to spread around the damage, to spread around the problems. Otherwise, it's going to get your one big bad is going to get mobbed really really fast, and you as a GM may be disappointed. If you were looking for a big climactic battle, it shouldn't be just one big armored knight. He should have squires and helpers. Exceptions with dragons, of course.
Yes.
Dragons have been built to be able to take on multiple opponents at one time. So that's a whole different
And
story.
then Beholders is the other one of those, I think.
Yeah, beholders, big demons,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So um now when here's another part about training new GMs. When you have trained your GMs, what's the outcome been?
So far, they've taken my advice. I'm still in the really early stages of
Sure.
training on most of them, but I've seen pretty big improvements off the bat. Sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't. Just depends on the person.
Right.
But people who listen generally do kind of take that into account. And the people who don't, well, I mean, why are you asking me at that point, you know?
Right.
Um, but yeah, I generally outcomes have been pretty good. I think so far in my experience, the best way to train a DM is make sure they know what to do, and then do it with them. Either DM for them and say, "This is what I'm doing. This is why I'm doing it," or have them DM for you and have them say, "This is why I'm doing this. This is how I'm doing it."
That is brilliant. That is some of the best advice I've ever heard. I'm being dead serious.
I
I've never thought about that.
appreciate it.
Like, I really mean it. I've never thought about like I'm running a game, but I'm going to break everything down for you, and I'm going to explain what I'm doing every step of the way. That's amazing. And then have them do that back. That's pretty brilliant. I think that's a wonderful piece of advice, and that's worked out for
Well,
you.
I mean, so far, I mean, again, I have trained a total of like 3 people, or in the process of training like 3 people, and that one seems to work the best.
That is really cool. Very,
I
very
think an important part of that is making sure they know what to do. And I think that brings me into my next biggest question. I think probably going to be the final
yep.
big overall point for this episode, which is what are the most important things, the absolute must knows. If you don't know these, you're going to have a very hard time being a dungeon master.
That's a fantastic question, and something we talked about like for literally a split second right before this. So I've been percolating on it. The thing that you have to know, um, ironically, it pains me to say this, is that you actually really need to know the rules. And the reason I say that is anybody can tell a story. Anybody can tell an interactive story where we pass a stick. Like I tell you a story, you're walking down the wood, you're walking through the woods, you hear a noise off to the left. Uh, I pass the stick to you. You tell me what your character does. You tell me what your character does, and you pass. Okay, now the thing is getting closer, and you can see a shape getting closer. It's a bigger shadow. Anybody can do that. We don't need to look up rules. We don't need to look up books. All right, we could do it in 1 minute. Um, but the rules are actually important because, as we said, they're the third. The rules and the dice are the third intercessor. So that's the magic of D&D. We could play pass the stick storytelling exercise. Great. People have been doing that for thousands of years. But what makes D&D magic is that there's this third party, this other element that we don't control, that will do things like, okay, your big bad guy trips and falls and he drops a sword. What? Wait a minute. No, it's supposed to be this climactic. No, it's hilarious. And your big bad guy looks like a fool. Um,
Yep.
or my super charismatic bard tries to seduce the queen, and instead of it working perfectly, she gets really, really mad at him and orders his execution. What? That's not how the story. So that's the fun and magic of D&D is that your story might be going this way, but then all of a sudden things turn 90 degrees because there are things like dice and the rules involved. So it is
Always.
important for you to know the rules. You don't have to know all the rules. You don't have to be a rule expert, but you have to know you have to know some basics about the character classes. I've had GMs, beginning GMs like you were saying, who don't know the first thing about any of the character classes at all. They know the
You
name.
have to have a basic understanding of what your characters can do.
Yes.
Um, yes, I absolutely agree. Now, Rush,
Mhm.
do our new GMs who are watching this, do they have to memorize every spell in the book?
No, 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 absolutely not. What you can do, especially so it's not intimidating and overwhelming for a new GM. You can kind of divide this responsibility. Like if you know, generally speaking, what a fighter, wizard, rogue can do, you can lean on the wizard and the fighter and the rogue to tell you, okay, what they can do. And I do that a lot. A lot if it's a character class or ability that I'm not familiar with, I'm like, well, okay, I don't know how that works. How does that
Yeah.
work? You supposed to have read all this stuff about your character. Tell me. And then even if it's overpowered, even if it breaks the adventure, I'll go home after the session and read up. And I'll be like, okay, you're right. Or no, it doesn't really work that way. I always err on the side of the player and then go home and do my homework and then go, oh, okay, this is how it works. And that's how I learned the system. And that's how I don't have to spend hours reading the book. Um, Cover to cover, it's broken up minutes at a time throughout the day.
It's definitely how it that is definitely the reason I know so much about fighters and barbarians and rogues and not so much about paladins and druids.
Oh, okay, because
But
you played.
those are the characters that people play. Bear in mind, I do know some stuff about paladins and druids. I just don't know the level 12, level 13 abilities where, I can wild shape and now I can swim and fly and turn into a Tyrannosaurus dragon. Like, that is so far out of my pay grade.
No, that a great example of something that happened to me was this guy cast polymorph on himself. This is very recently. He said I turned myself into a young black dragon. I'm like, what? And I did a very quick, super quick read of the polymorph spell, and I'm like, okay, that's fine. And he breathed acid on people. He's flying around, and then I read later after the
Can only
session.
do beasts.
Yeah, you have to be. You can only polymorph into a beast. And so that worked out perfectly because it was like we didn't get in a rules argument. I didn't wasn't like you can't do that or that's too powerful. Go ahead, it's okay, it's cool. But then I'd read later. I'm like, okay, by the way, I'm glad you had fun as a dragon. That was pretty cool. But here's the deal. And I
Can't
told
do
him
any
I'm
more.
not going to cry for you too hard because at 8th level you get to turn into a Tyrannosaurus Rex. So I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna.
That's
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah,
I'm gonna sorry, not so sorry. Like
right. You can't turn into a black dragon, but you can turn into a T-Rex. So
yeah. Go get your short arms.
right. Um, but I would say that is the number one thing a new game master needs to know is at least a baseline knowledge of the rules because everything else will come after. Like you
Yeah.
you will figure out your pacing. That'll happen. Figure
Absolutely.
out how to do the hooks. That'll happen.
Know your action economy. Know what
Yeah.
your players can do. The
Yep.
basics of what
Yep.
your players can do.
Yep.
Know how some of those more key line class abilities work. And by that I mean sneak attack, action surge, bardic inspiration. Know how those abilities work because they are going to be using them a lot.
I would
Um,
say just know how the math works. A lot of
yeah,
people are like, well, if you roll high, then you succeed. If you roll low, you don't succeed. No, actually
yeah.
know how the math works.
Know how to set a DC. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's important.
Yep.
I'm trying to think of. I had other stuff. I think that's it.
Yeah, it's not a long
Yeah.
list,
Know how?
but you
Yeah.
need to
Know how skill
actually know
checks
those things.
work.
Yeah, it's not a long list, but you actually need to know those things. And a lot of beginning
Absolutely.
young GMs, like you said, they're just so excited they don't know how to do those things.
And if you are still learning all of this stuff, if you have just kind of went home and you studied all this stuff, I highly, highly advise you also knowing the basics of what your adventure is going to be. As you get more and more experienced, the more you will be able to improvise. But if you are trying to keep in your head how these abilities work and how these rules work, and you're not quite there yet, you don't want to be adding more into your brain. That's just going to make the adventure slower and it's not going to make it as fun for the players. So just, it's okay the first couple times be a little bit railroady. That's okay. And more over time, you'll sink into it. It'll become more natural. You don't need to worry so much as long as you know the basics. Nobody's expecting you to be an expert, but just be kind of the guiding force that you can guide the players along your adventure.
I agree 100%. Really like how you said you need to know the basics of your adventure. I mean, that's the only thing I'm gonna highlight. That's I on 100% agree.
And if you need help, if you need more help beyond this, you don't have an awesome person like me to help you learn how to DM. I highly advise getting one of these. They're awesome. They're really helpful. They talk a lot about magic items, traps, all that really advanced stuff, as well as some of the more basic stuff for dungeon mastering. If you're just learning, I highly advise you pick up a copy of one of these. It is truly, truly amazing.
That's
Beyond that, Rush,
yeah.
I think that's everything.
Yep. I agree. I think so
Um,
we reviewed how you trained GMs, you. We reviewed
yes,
the three things that GMs tend to struggle with the most, which is hooks, pacing, and uh,
combat.
combat, essentially. And then we went over what GMs need to know, like need to know.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're out of
I
time.
think that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So
we will see you next time.
yeah, thank you everybody for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, go check out Rush on Facebook and all of those places. Those links will be down in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next week.